This is Future Fork, a show that explores the world of food and the decisions we can make today that will shape our future. On the show, you'll hear from innovators in the food space. We'll have disruptive conversations with people from around the globe who are taking the lead on topics like food sustainability, ending world hunger, food security, and so much more. I'm your host, Paul Newnham. Today we're chatting with Afshan Khan. Afshan is the UN Assistant Secretary General, the coordinator of the Scaling Up Nutrition movement. This is a global initiative aimed at ending all forms of malnutrition by 2030. In this episode, Afshan will take us through her journey and the journey of Sun. You'll hear what the movement is all about, how Afshan measures success when trying to achieve such a huge goal, and Afshan shares why initiatives like this matter in 2024. Let's jump in. Afshan, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. It's great to be here.
You've had a long career driving change, working with UNICEF and a number of other organizations. When you look back at this career, what's one key highlight that you're particularly proud of?
I guess for me, I would probably say the work that I've done in humanitarian emergencies, possibly because you see the immediate results on what a difference interventions can make in saving children's lives. And I've seen that with therapeutic feeding, with clean water and sanitation, with immunization, and the ability to both support women in a really meaningful way and get an instant result with some of the therapeutic feeding that's provided and see that child almost wake up again is incredibly heartwarming. But at the same time, you have in the back of your head that this is not a long-term solution. But I would still say the humanitarian piece stays with you, and perhaps it etches a little bit in your own head because it's such a visceral moment between life and death for so many kids.
And you're really focused on nutrition. Why is that something that you're passionate about?
For me, I think it's partly the fact that nutrition cuts across so many sectors, and it's not one individual thing that can make the right outcome, but it's almost like bringing all of the goals for development together and seeing how do we make sure that nutrition is really touched upon in these different sectors. And that, for me, it's a challenge in a way, because we've just been at the African Food Systems Forum. I'm telling you, not every single minister thinks about nutritional outcomes when they're thinking about agriculture. But to me, food systems without nutrition is like having air without oxygen. And if you're going to make food systems work, they have to work for people. And probably having good, nutritious food and a healthy diet is the best way to make nutrition work for people.
Yeah, absolutely. Completely agree. The Scaling Up Nutrition movement is in 66 countries, is that correct?
Yeah, 66 countries and 4 Indian states.
Yes. And for those who don't know, what is Scaling Up Nutrition?
So Scaling Up Nutrition is really a movement. It's government-led. So these 66 countries are in the driver's seat. They appoint a focal point that's going to lead on their nutrition work in a cross-sectoral way. Often they're in the Ministry of Planning or Finance or in the Office of the President or the Prime Minister to really play this role of multi-sectoral coordination that I talked about. So that's one, and I think that's the secret sauce of the movement. The second part I would say that is really critical is it brings in civil society and all they can do to advocate and work at the local and subnational level. It brings in small and medium enterprises, so businesses that are producing quality, nutritious foods. It brings in the UN agencies that in many places, and particularly as we talked about in many humanitarian contexts, have such a big role to play. And lastly, it brings in both donor governments, so development partners, including philanthropies, but also more recently academic networks. So seeing what's the science and research and evidence that's coming out of each country. So what are some of the game changers? So, we met earlier today on the beans and the biofortification. So how can those kind of initiatives really I would say, accelerate and jumpstart addressing some of the bottlenecks we have towards micronutrient deficiencies or anemia. So the movement, the catalyst of bringing together all these stakeholders together in a way that there's no logos, there's no identity, but they're working together with one single aim, and that's to address malnutrition in all its forms, is really exciting for me.
Yeah, no, it's super exciting. And so your role specifically, what does your role involve in this massive cause and movement?
Well, I think one, it's advocating on the issue, because we know that SDG 2 is quite broad, and the nutrition elements need to come up in the way that they touch on several different SDGs. So it's the advocacy piece. The second piece is really creating that big tent to convene partners in a meaningful way. So it's both advocating with governments internally so that they are bringing to the sectors that can make the most difference for nutrition outcomes. It's looking at what does the financing look like? So where are the domestic budgets going? Where are the bilateral investments going? Where are the aid budgets going? How are the IFIs influencing? And having those conversations and discussions at the national level. And the third role is, I think, working with the regional hubs that we now have in the Sun movement. That includes civil society, it includes part of the Sun Secretariat, to really see from countries what kind of technical support do they need, or what kind of accompaniment do they need to make sure that their national plans are robust and they're bringing stakeholders together. And then lastly, I would say it's working with other stakeholders so that we have a strong policy agenda going forward. And if I look at, say, this year in particular, it's been kind of intense. We have the Africa Food System Summit. We have the Sun Global Gathering coming up in November in Kigali. We have the Nutrition for Growth Summit. We had the Food System Stocktake +4. And then we have financing for development. And that's just the global part. On the continent, there's the post-Malabo follow-up. There'll be the heads of state meeting in January. So there are real opportunities to see how does nutrition become a connector in the various policy discussions that are going on, and we're able to elevate it as both a maker and a marker of development.
So tell me a little bit more about the global gathering. What's that?
So the global gathering really brings together all 66 Sun countries and all the stakeholders that are part of Sun: civil society, small and medium enterprises, UN agencies, the Sun focal points, but also their ministers, national governments, a few heads of state, with the real aim to profile and elevate what have we learned around nutrition that works, what are some of the obstacles and challenges we're facing, how can we tackle those together, and what's the way forward in terms of the new commitments that the Sun countries are going to make at the next Nutrition for Growth Summit. The last one was held in Tokyo. There were some very strong financial commitments made by many governments. There were targets set. It's an opportunity to review, where did we get to? What have we missed? Where have we had success? And where do we want to go to next?
On success, what are you hopeful for coming out of the Sun Global Gathering?
I'm hoping for a reinforced dialogue on really the Sun movement coming together to support nutrition outcomes. I think we have a unique moment now with the post-Malabo Declaration and CAADP to really influence what are the goals around the African Union. And I think for me, just that moment to capture and that buzz to exchange what works amongst the various stakeholders, elevate the role of small and medium enterprises. We heard at the Africa Food System Summit, 85% of the continent's food comes from micro, small, and medium enterprises. There's a real opportunity there to invest more, to create new jobs for young people, to make agri-food business part of a driver of social change. And I think we also have a unique opportunity also to focus a little bit more heavily on the fragile states that are impacted by conflict and climate, and say, what are we going to do to make sure that we curb the steady increase in malnutrition that we've seen in these countries? What are the resilience measures that can be put in, whether it's social protection, whether it's more support to local civil society, or whether it's new products that may be able to break a cycle of malnutrition that's spiraling and leading to the deaths, unfortunately, of many more children than we would like to see.
Yeah. You mentioned the COP29, the climate summit. What connection is there between climate and nutrition, do you think?
Well, climate and nutrition, I think it touches on multiple factors. I think, first of all, just in terms of the nutrient content of food, as a result of climate change, we're seeing a real decline in micronutrients, whether it's zinc or other nutrients that are key in certain crops. The second is we've seen a real loss of production. Let's look at maize in Zimbabwe. Zimbabwe's just had the worst drought in 40 years. They've lost 70% of their maize crop. That's a staple for that population. How then are we going to mitigate the effects of that climate change? What kind of social support can be provided to communities? And then if I look at Somalia and the floods, we've seen floods and drought impact people exponentially. It's led to increased displacement. And wherever you have displacement, you see malnutrition rates rise. So it's not just that climate has impact on the crops, on what's grown, on the nutrient content. It also has an immediate impact on people through displacement, in many instances, lack of clean water. And the intersection between disease and malnutrition is huge. And clean water or poor water and poor sanitation is still one of the major causes for diarrhea and deaths amongst kids. So climate change, I would say, impacts nutrition in so many different ways, in the agricultural sector, in the health sector, in social protection, and in the very livelihoods and day-to-day living of people. And you just have to look at Sahel, the Horn, and now Southern Africa. The impact has been huge.
Yeah, no, absolutely. You mentioned nutrition for growth. Can you give a quick what is it and how will it help us really drive forward sustainable, healthy diets for all?
I think nutrition for growth, because it's broader than the Sun movement, it brings in many of the governments in Europe, in Asia, in Latin America. It's an opportunity to put some forward-looking thinking around healthy diets. I think we've had a lot of our focus traditionally on undernutrition, and that's what I've spoken to as well, because there's such big gaps still left to address vis-a-vis stunting or wasting, whether that's on the continent or whether it's Asia. I think nutrition for growth is an opportunity to broaden that dialogue, to say healthy, nutritious diets is a gap in lower income countries, in middle income countries, and even in high income countries. No country has been able to say healthy, nutritious diets are accessible for all. And I think nutrition for growth is an opportunity for all countries to speak to what commitments they're ready to make. It's an opportunity to identify in their own national capacity, what does nutritious food and a healthy diet mean for them? Many countries in the West as well, or the North, if you want to talk about it that way, don't have food-based dietary guidelines clearly spelt out, nor do they have a national strategy for how they're going to ensure healthy diets for their population or standards around public procurement, whether that's for schools or hospitals or elder centers. So nutrition for growth is an opportunity to re-energize that commitment, to make sure nutrition is poised at the center of SDGs, and to take that forward, not just in Paris, linked to this Olympics, but linked to the next Olympics that'll be held in the United States, in Los Angeles, and the subsequent Olympics that are going to be held in Australia and Queensland. So we really get a common thread on nutrition and a commitment amongst all these Olympic countries to really put nutrition at the forefront of a long-term strategy and at the center of many of the development goals in all countries, irrespective of their economic status.
So one of the things that we know is a critical hurdle for scaling up evidence-based solutions that can improve nutrition and really help us drive this is finance. At the national level, when we start to look at financing, how do the shortfalls around nutrition financing affect the progress in some of the SUNS countries that you're working with?
I think nutrition finance makes or breaks what countries are able to do at the national level. So we've been working very closely with a number of governments to identify what is the domestic investment, domestic budget, how do you tag and monitor that more clearly? Where are the gaps in terms of what can be invested by bilateral partners? So we're elevating that investment to identify what's coming in for nutrition. Where are the opportunities with international financial institutions, and how can that concessional financing support nutrition? And then the private sector as well, because I think we've underestimated the private sector and industry, because ultimately it's private sector that produces, distributes, and sells food. How can they be identified as partners in tackling the nutrition agenda? What are they producing now? How can we encourage that production as nutritious, healthy food? And how can we make sure that that aspect of the supply chain on food production is costed, and government both creates policies and incentives that create opportunities for business that produce quality, nutritious food, and how are those businesses supported to grow and scale?
So if we think about the financing solutions that we need to get behind in the short term to really drive forward change around SDG 2, what should we be advocating for? Like, what should we be asking for around community and pushing forward this to unlock, I suppose, really the change that we need?
Strengthen domestic budgets that clearly tag and monitor where nutrition investments are going, whether that's the ag sector, the social protection, the health sector, industry and commerce, as we talked about, education, tagging that very clearly, being able to map that and share that with development partners and ask them to coordinate their investment so that we're looking at not just a siloed projectized approach, but focusing on development outcomes. A clearer strategy with the international banks. The African Development Bank has made a clear commitment for some 50% of its assistance to be nutrition sensitive. I'd like to see that across all of the IFIs. Yeah. And then lastly, a clear plan nationally for commercial investment in nutrition. And then lastly, I would think there's some opportunities also around better harnessing the capacity of climate financing to influence nutrition outcomes in a positive way.
So one of the things that I like to talk to people about, and given today we're at the Africa Food System Forum and we were involved in a culinary challenge, I like to ask people to tell us about a food that they're enjoying at the moment. What's something that you've been eating and really enjoying over the past little while?
You know, I have to break it to you, the bean burger was delicious. And to me, the mix of ginger and spice and coriander, it really made me rethink. I've never had such a good bean burger as I had here. But I must say, I went to a wonderful Rwandan restaurant, actually hosted by you. And there, the use of pumpkin and some of the local products was amazing. So I think the more we can build up the opportunity for people to be excited about food that's sourced on local seasonal ingredients that don't cost an arm or a leg, but are used in creative ways to build a culture of culinary skills from local products that people can be proud of. We'd be bringing nutrition into not being this geeky technical thing, but something that everybody can understand, because everybody needs to eat, but you can also love what you eat and enjoy it and make it part of an inspiration and an exploration for not just you, but your family and friends.
I absolutely love that. And I love that inspiration and aspiration. I think food is something that does connect us, and it's gathering around tables and having those kinds of meals that brings joy and connection. And so, yeah, I really love that. Thank you for joining us on the show. I really appreciate it. Keep up the great work.
Thank you. Nice talking to you.
You've been listening to Future Fork, a show that explores the world of food and the decisions we can make today that will shape our future. Future Fork is produced by Disruptive Consulting Solutions and supports the SDG2 Advocacy Hub. For more info, head to the website futureforkpodcast.com. This show was produced with strategy and production support from Wavelength Creative. So you don't miss an episode of Future Fork, make sure to subscribe to or follow the show in your podcast app. And while you're there, leave us a 5-star review. It really helps others find the show. I'm Paul Newnham, and I'll see you in the next episode.